Hi, everyone. My name is Gabby Witte, and the title of my project is a bit of a mouthful, Implementation of a Social Justice Focused Structured Peer Group Supervision for Private Practice Trauma Therapists. So as you can probably guess by now, we're all here talking about our various projects using implementation science to detail the process of implementing an evidence-based intervention to address a specific problem. And so the problem that inspired my project, I first noticed in my postgraduate clinical trauma training, and a lot of trauma interventions focus on the client's individual trauma symptoms that need to decrease as the main issue, instead of the larger contextual experiences that either cause the trauma in the first place or exacerbate the trauma symptoms. And this is an issue because a lack of social context in trauma theory can contribute to victim blaming, client feelings of shame and guilt. Traditional clinical training programs and academic programs often don't talk about how to integrate social justice when it comes to clinical trauma therapy. And so the mission for my project was to figure out how do we teach trauma therapists to integrate the social justice in a concrete way, because we know through research that when social justice is included in trauma therapy, the mental health outcomes are better.
I just ordered it.
But before we look at the intervention, we have to have an idea of what social justice in therapy looks like. And so one definition of social justice is an ideal condition where all members of society have the same rights, opportunities, obligations, and social benefits. Social justice is often used as an umbrella term, so there can be a lot of different definitions under that umbrella. When it comes to therapy, incorporating social justice often looks like an acknowledgement of inequalities, experiences of oppression and discrimination, both at a micro and a macro level, and experiences related to various dimensions of identity. So some examples of social justice topics in therapy that get discussed might be how racism, gender identity, socioeconomic status, etc., play a role in a client's experience of a traumatic event, their presentation of trauma symptoms, and their journey to trauma recovery. So what do we do about this? After researching a bunch of different interventions, I landed on structured peer group supervision, or SPGS for short. And SPGS is a type of supervision where a group of peers within a clinical profession meet regularly to discuss their work, their client cases, the interventions they're using, and give and receive feedback. What's important here is the distinction between SPGS and other models of supervision is that SPGS is all peers. There's no one leader or knowledge expert, so all participants are peers and share feedback as equals. Very social justice minded. So for this specific cohort, though, there was a focus of social justice added to work through that lens. There were 6 participants and myself, so 7 total. We attended an orientation session and 6 case consultation sessions, which lasted for 2 hours each. And in each session, 2 participants would present a client case. We would discuss the relevant social justice issues and challenges presenting in the therapy. And this was all done on a virtual platform. Unlike some of the other implementation projects that were based in an agency or within an organization, the base for my project started with my small private therapy practice. So the practice is located in New York City, and I provide individual trauma therapy to anywhere between 7 and 10 adult women. My practice is only me, and so in order to implement SPGS, I recruited a network of other private practice trauma therapists. So in order to participate, they needed to be a trauma therapist working in the United States, serving adults in a private practice setting. To plan for the implementation for SPGS, I used a theory called the COM-B alongside the Theoretical Domains Framework, or the TDF. An illustration of the COM-B can be seen on the left and the TDF on the right. Both of these frameworks facilitate a focus on individual level change, and because SPGS was being done with a network of individual therapists rather than within an agency, it was important to use theories and frameworks that targeted individuals. Part of the implementation process involves identifying barriers to that implementation. There were 3 main barriers that I identified for implementing SPGS. lack of knowledge of the process, lack of knowledge of the benefits, and cosmopolitanism, or the degree to which an organization is networked with others. So as you know from the slide earlier, my private practice is just me, and it was not well networked, so that was a barrier. And you can't really implement a group intervention if there's no people to join, so I had to find them. And then in order to get people to join, if they don't know what it is or why it's helpful, they're not going to join. So I had to get that information out there so people would want to join the SPGS cohort. And to address the barriers, I chose 4 strategies. Building a coalition, which I did by creating a digital professional collaboration network, by developing and distributing educational meetings. So to do that, I just created some marketing materials to get the information out there, entice people to come. And then finally, conducting educational meetings, which for me looks like an initial information session / interview to get to know the people who were interested, and then an orientation session before the start of the official case consultation session. To evaluate the first implementation research question, the number of therapists who expressed interest in joining the group, the number of therapists who attended the initial information meeting, and then of course the number of people who joined SPGS were tracked. So I had a total of 9 therapists that reached out for more information from various platforms, and then 6 ended up joining the cohort. So what I take from that is that means that using a digital PCN does in fact build a network of therapists to recruit. For the other implementation research questions, 1 sample t-tests were performed on the composite scores related to the different survey questions to determine if the coded responses indicated that the advertisements and the initial meetings increased participants' knowledge of the process and knowledge of the benefits significantly. And you can see on the chart on the right, they did. So the results indicate that digital educational marketing materials and informational meetings and interviews increase knowledge of the process and the benefits of SPGS. Here we have some examples of qualitative data from the focus group about the implementation process. So these quotes were from 2 different participants based on 2 different questions. And overall, the qualitative results from the focus group validated the quantitative results. To answer the intervention questions, I used non-paired 2-sample t-tests using the pre-intervention responses and the post-intervention responses for each survey question. So the analysis found that participating in the group increased the amount or the number of social justice topics integrated and the level of confidence when integrating SPGS, or integrating social justice topics rather. These 2 results were found to be statistically significant. The other 2 research questions about frequency and comfort levels, we couldn't answer because of statistical insignificance, even though the mean post-intervention did actually increase. And then an added benefit that I didn't intentionally look at, but came out from a lot of the participants in the focus group was the reduction of isolation. Working in private practice can be very isolating because you're working on your own, not in an agency or in an office with other people. So this theme arose in the focus group, and I thought it was important to note. And again, we have some examples of qualitative data from the focus group about the intervention. So again, these quotes were from 2 different people, and overall, the qualitative results aligned with the quantitative results. So as you've heard from my 2 colleagues who presented before me, inevitably adaptations are made in an implementation process. So I made 3 during my process. For implementation adaptations, pretty much right away, I had challenges scheduling. I had this grand idea that I was going to make it more accessible by waiting until I recruited members to choose dates and time for these sessions that we could all choose together. And as you can imagine, rounding up 7 people is actually impossible at the same time. So right away, instead of verbally discussing the schedule like I had planned, we started using a scheduling software. We used 2 different ones to find one that the functionality worked for us. And then instead of scheduling all the sessions at once, which was in the initial plan, we scheduled session to session. So at the end of one, we'd schedule for the next one. And the focus groups actually had to be broken up into 3 different focus groups for the same reason. Okay. And then for intervention adaptations, the first thing I did was the addition of a group contract. Now, nowhere in the literature about SPGS is there the inclusion of a group contract or group guideline, but the literature does state how important it is for people to feel comfortable to share in the group and to understand their role. So I added this as a method to help establish that safety. So we all got to decide collectively what kinds of behaviors and interactions do we want to see in the group space? What would we do if there was conflict in the group? And that really allowed participants to feel safer to participate in an open and honest way, which is necessary for this kind of intervention to be effective. And then finally, the number of SPGS sessions. In my original plan, we were supposed to meet for 8 sessions in addition to the orientation and the focus group. But because of people's schedules and also the timeline of this program, and I had some delays with IRB to approve this project to commence, it was shortened to 6. Insights. So some of my implementation insights, first, passive posting does not yield recruitment results. So I had the best results of people being interested in potentially joining when I cold contacted them directly. Second, a variety of methods and platforms are needed to effectively spread the information to get the greatest number of people to respond. And so I ended up recruiting members, or the members who officially joined, from 6 different platforms, right? So not everybody's all on the same place, so you got to diversify to reach all the people. And lastly, choice and collaboration is important, but it can still be given without sacrificing structure. So this goes along with the issue of the scheduling. In the focus groups, all of the participants said that they liked the choice. However, it would have been more helpful if I had given a few options of specific dates and times that they could choose from so that there was still consistency. Intervention insights, promising evidence that SPGS works for integrating social justice. It's a versatile intervention, and key important part, personalities and knowledge of the participants makes or breaks the intervention. Next steps, implementation science is not just about the research part, it's about the dissemination of information. So in that spirit, next step is to publish my capstone paper to get that information out there. I created a considerations and how-to guide to give some instruction on concretely running this group. If you remember earlier, there's lack of that, so that's important. And then lastly, after I take a break, everybody in the group really liked it, myself included, and asked if I would keep doing it. So that's definitely on the table. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.